Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. Now, I know technically we've already done the 5 songs for this week's theme of hidden gems, but I figure let's keep it going a little longer. I found one of your suggestions from the comments and decided we'd go ahead and check that out as well. This one is for a band called ALOOSH. The song is called Time, and it appears that this band, or at least this song, came out over a decade ago. So we're looking at a bit of an older band, though I don't know if they're still producing music. I suppose I can look that up later. We'll talk about that towards the end of the video. For now, let's just dive in and see what kind of music ALOOSH is bringing to the table today. Dude, that's wild. It's 4/4, but it doesn't always emphasize beat 1 of a bar. So it feels like things are just a hair a bit off. I like the bass guitar on the intro, but all we have here is the synth and drums. And with drums, it's just bass and snare, no cymbal. Ooh. The vocals aren't pitched. A little bit of harmonic instability there too, but we are introducing dissonance into the guitar chords. Bringing it to a synth off to the side now. The vocals are very smooth against the rigidness of the rhythms and harmonies. Ooh. I like the drum production. The guitar and bass. Oh! Very large, lush synth tones. I love the bass tone under this too. That was a nice... Oh, it's over. All right, there's 2 main ideas here. One is the rhythmic, groovy, syncopated section that takes up a majority of this track, and the other is the more straightforward rock part that we saw for a small quarter possibly of the song showing up at the end of the track. They work together because of the way they contrast. It is this feeling of tension and then resolution, of stress and comfort. I find it interesting then that the song does end, albeit shortly and abruptly, on the more tense, chaotic idea. But speaking about that idea, let's see what's going on here. We have the bump, 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 super syncopated. We have a backbeat idea. We have snare accents on 2 and 4 throughout a majority of this track. That gives us our 4/4. It gives us our rhythmic pulse. The other notes that come from the guitar, that come from the synth, the ones that dance around that 2 and 4 backbeat, they give us the syncopation. That creates the groovy element, but it isn't a consistent groove. It interrupts and changes the directionality of itself frequently. This is what makes it feel a bit jarring. It's what makes it difficult to get into. And I think frequently we also see that there is a missed downbeat on the beat 1. It doesn't show up all the time. We do have beat 1 accents in this rhythm, but also frequently we don't. And it's just this pocket because the snare is accenting on 2 and 4, so there's no 1 beat accent there either. And it's just this pocket of space where it just feels kind of weird. A downbeat on 1 makes sense, if not from your main percussive instrument, then from the melody line. They usually start on a downbeat or maybe a pickup note into the downbeat. A pickup note would just be like a note that comes in half a beat early or a beat early. It's not the beginning of the beat, or sorry, it's not the beginning of the bar, but it is the beginning of the phrase. Basically, you start the phrase a little bit before the bar begins. And that's called a pickup note. But we don't have any of that. We just have this empty space where we expect the main landmark to be to help us rhythmically and temporally through this song. And it's just kind of missing. And so we have a rhythmic pattern that's a little jaggy, a little unexpected. It's syncopated. We can groove to that, but it's not super consistent. There is a pattern to it if you can pick up on it, but it's larger than 1 or 2 bars long. You really have to get a feel for the larger idea to see how it works at individual portions within that. And we don't have our landmark on beat 1. It creates something that from the get-go feels a little awkward, difficult to get into, difficult to figure out where you are and how you're moving within this space. The other instruments jump in. We have a bass guitar, we have the electric guitar. They don't really help. There's just more syncopation to it. In fact, was it the end of the first verse or second verse? It was the end of one of them. I noticed that the bass was playing the same thing that the guitar was, except it was half of a beat behind, acting as almost like a low-end shadow to the main rhythmic idea coming from the guitar. So now we're just adding more rhythmic complexity to a song that's already a little rhythmically complex. It makes a song that, like I said, just kind of difficult to get into until you figure out what's going on. And there is one instrument that helps with that. The vocals as a whole kind of distance themselves from all this timey-wimey nonsense, and they just kind of stick to a pretty standard 4/4 kind of catchy melodic idea. There's a lot of longer held out notes, and it helps distance from all of these sharper, rougher, syncopated ideas, but there's also a shift in timbre as well. I had mentioned that the vocals were rather smooth. When I make sounds of what the guitar is doing, it's these very sharper, more abrasive sounds due to the heavy palm muting, the heavy picking going on in it. It creates a sharper tone to everything, whereas the vocals are very soft, they're very smooth. There's not a lot of heavy attack. Notes kind of fade in gently, quickly, but gently, and then they're just kind of held out. There's not a lot of choppiness to the rhythm. It creates this more palatable or softer sound to go along with all of the jaggedness that exists elsewhere from pretty much every other instrument. Now, the vocals do contribute to that empty beat one at times, but not all the time. Sometimes they take the opportunity to be the only instrument in those moments. And I think that's interesting too, to basically have the vocals say, okay, this is a moment where the song is doing this thing. I'm going to seize the opportunity to be heard. And I'm curious if those specific words or syllables that pop up in those moments are important, or maybe something that needs to be highlighted against everything else. Overall, though, I find that once you get into the groove of this, it's a fun little jam. There's some cool bass lines in here, and it is super funky. Kind of dig all that. But it is fairly focused. There are two main points to it, but they're also very similar in blueprint, in foundation, in goals, in atmosphere. We kind of bounce between those two twice, like a verse chorus kind of thing. And then we have the bridge, possibly, slash outro. This was phenomenal, acting as a massive counter to everything we just explored. This is warm, it's resonant, everything's working together in layers to create these rich chords. We have a very obvious chord progression going on here. We need to talk about chords real quick too. And it's just a very harmonious moment where everything works together for a positive effect rather than working together for a more jagged and mesmerizing effect. And this whole thing, because of the vocal layers, because of the chords underneath, it ends up feeling very rich, very warm, very comforting. It is the opposite of the stress and anxiety previously in the track and focuses on something that feels warm and inviting. And it only gets richer and richer as the song continues. What starts off with a couple of guitar chords, the bass, the drums, and one lead vocal. I think there's a second vocalist. It's really quiet though. The volume rises, the synths begin to support underneath. I think we get a third vocal line, whether that is the third person in the band or maybe just a double track going on. There is a third set of vocals that comes in. And by the end of it, it feels like it's taking up all of this space. It feels very large. This is in stark contrast to something I didn't really bring up yet, but in the previous segments, it kind of feels empty. Part of that is because of the heavy use of space due to all the instruments using rests between notes to create the pockets of space that helps with the syncopation. But it's also that there's a lot of open space everywhere. There's not a lot of layered instrumentation that is going to stack up and amplify the sounds to fill the sound sphere. And so what felt kind of, well, at the time it didn't feel too empty because it was the only thing we had to base anything on, but it was empty and syncopated and separated. We now have something very warm and connected, full. This makes the return back to the other segment in the final 4 bars of the song an interesting choice. We have returned back to what I would say is more of a subjective negativity. It's still bright and poppy and fun, but to me it represents isolation. It represents things that have fallen apart, that no longer work well together. It represents anxiety rather than comfort. And we end the song on that rather than the warm, inviting chordal elements. And this idea of anxiety, I think, is baked into more than just production, spaciousness, and rhythmic ideas. Something I forgot to bring up was there was one moment, we had that verse chorus and then this thing, and then the verse chorus, and then, the big moment at the end, but this thing in the center. This was wild because we had whispering on the sides with a little bit of pitch, specifically on the left one, and it's not aiming for pitches. Like I said, it's kind of whispery anyways. There's just a hint of pitch in there, but there is pitch, and it clashes with the chords that the guitar is playing. But the guitar is playing these chords that are rising in pitch And every subsequent chord is more tense, more dissonant, less stable than the one that precedes it, at least as far as the four chords are. Once we hit the top one and return back down to the bottom, we return to a state of more stability. But then we rise up again. So this whole section just feels tense, like the walls are closing in, the tension is escalating, it's rising in pitch and volume, in tension and dissonance. We have voices off on the sides, and they're just kind of clashing harmonically with the notes in the center, but it's also just whispers, two completely different lines. It's like you're being spoken to from multiple sources. You can't pay attention to any of them. You don't know what to do in this situation. And if you could pay attention to them, it's hard to discern what they're even saying, because honestly, they're whispering it at such a low level that it's just, whoa, this moment is so tense. And then we kind of lighten it up by just returning back to something that still feels kind of lost. It still feels kind of tense. But comparatively, it's a relief. And from here, we move into the warm comforting. I really like this element of kind of starting middle-ish, maybe a little above middle, hitting really peak tense areas. Again, returning to a little above middle, and then low, comforting, calming, cooling, only to come back up, kind of hovering around this middle tension level. It's an interesting decision to tell a story on. It really makes me curious what the lyrics are, so let's dive into them. All right, so I couldn't find the lyrics, listened to it again and wrote them down by hand, or at least the gist of them. It is about someone who is wounded, hurt by someone who has betrayed them. The first verse says that they've been waiting at the bar patiently for hours and hours and are drinking. Basically, a little bit later says something like, if you brought me flowers, it still wouldn't be enough. This moves over into what I thought at the time might have been a chorus, and actually I still think it might be, but the structure of the song is a little more complex than that. This section says, is your time more important than mine? From here, the second verse says that they've been sitting in tears, crying, being sad, but now they're trying to move past it. That this other person is basically, their name is worthless to them, and that there's nothing they can do to redeem themselves. And then once again, going back to the chorus of, is your time more important than mine? So they were supposed to be, presumably, hanging out there at a bar, maybe it's a date, and this other person didn't stand them up, but ended up coming in very late. Maybe this wasn't the first time, maybe it was, but this the line of, is your time more important than mine, makes it seem like maybe this is a repeat offense. This is something that's been building up inside of the main character for a while, and they're finally saying it. So they're hurt, they're wounded, all because they feel like they are less important than they feel they should be in this other person's life. And this takes us to the bridge, the really warm, resonant section in the back of the song. And the main idea here is that time moves slowly and I'm trying to find my peace. And I really like that, because everything else is contrasty. It's very tense. There's lots of rhythmic changes to it. There's a jaggedness to it, but this is calming. The song, I don't think temporally has slowed. If we check the tempo, it's probably about the same, if not the same tempo from both sections, but it feels like it slows down because the song is no longer focusing on the jaggedness of it. Also, the jaggedness probably represents these two people's lives not lining up. That's actually pretty cool. But everything feels warm and resonant. The vocals, the backup vocals support the main vocals. The harmonies are all strong and consonant. There's just a big element of unity here. It's about calm. The time slows and I try to find peace, to get away from the tension, the stress, the sadness of what I just experienced. Now, that works really well. The ending, though, goes back to the jaggedness, and we repeat the very first line of the song. I wait here patiently. I don't remember what it was. Anyways, the gist is that I wait here patiently. And I wonder if that's supposed to speak to a cyclicality of this. That even though she's told this person off and said, your name is nothing, you've basically drug yourself through the mud on this, that either she set up another time to hang out with them, or maybe it's another person who's falling into those same traps. Regardless, despite having found her peace and seemingly moved on, she finds herself in a similar situation where she cares more about a relationship than someone else does, and doesn't feel like she has the import in the other person's life. At least that's how I interpret the ending of the song. But these are just my thoughts on ALOOSH's Time. I really enjoyed this. I looked everywhere trying to find lyrics. I found out they had a Bandcamp and they have a couple of albums. I may end up checking out more from them because this was pretty cool. But what did you think about it? Did you enjoy it? Is there anything that stood out to you? Maybe something you'd like to add on to what I said, or maybe correct me on if I misspoke about something. Do you have a different interpretation or perspective on this? Please put all of that and any other thoughts you might have down into the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual, we're going to check out a full album tomorrow. Hope you're stoked for that. Also, I think it's Vocaloid. I think we have our first Vocaloid album review tomorrow. There's no way I can be prepared for it. Come on by if you want to see me get overwhelmed by some electronic music. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.